Hi, and welcome back to Walking the Virtual Dog. Now, this is the show where we take an in depth look at the IT industry through the eyes of the IT industry's own analysts. I'm Rick Grant, and to make sense of all this, we turn to veteran industry analyst relations practitioner Thomas Ward Lynch. Thomas, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Rick. We have a lot of fun doing these things because we look at all kinds of research. We look at all kinds of analyst discussions and trends and so forth. It's kind of nice to take a moment and just drill down on some of the trademarked research that's done by the analysts. Now, of course, on the Forrester side, you've got the Forrester waves. On the Gartner side, we have the Magic Quadrants. And those, of course, are showcasing detailed research that's being done by not only one analyst, but usually a team of analysts. And here's the thing. We can take a look at that data. We can take a look at that research through press releases that are generated as a result of the research, and also generated as the result of approval. Now, I just want to say this from someone who's been there and done that Magic Quadrants, Gartner Magic Quadrants, Forrester waves are tough. They're statistical driven evaluations of vendor offerings, in addition to statistical application of the research results. Qualitative data is also pressed into the positioning of the vendors. In short answer, Rick, it's really hard to engage as a vendor in these evaluations. I've done them and they're exhaustive. But if a vendor gets to participate, they have an opportunity to showcase their capabilities, customer references, use cases, roadmaps, and strategies to the analysts. And after the research is released, it's an opportunity for the vendors to promote the research and showcase their position under the strict guidelines of the IT analyst firms. You can't just say anything. The press releases must be submitted for approval, and a structured set of quotes from the IT analysts approved by the firm must be used. So it's not like you can go off on your own on this one. It's very, very strict, and it's very, very structured. And this is why I continue to track press releases. I'm looking for what the analysts have to say about their research. But because of time and content restraints, we don't always get to review or show the analyst quotes coming from the vendors. There's a lot of press releases that vendors, of course, want to do as soon as they get the research back and it's been released. But it's not always, it's just not always enough detail for us to go into exactly what the research was or exactly what the analyst had to say. Now, today's an exception due to the detailed level of a press release from iSolved displaying the research of Forrester for human capital management. So let's pull up the Forrester wave on human capital management first. Now, this was an interesting part of the press release, which was that according to a recent survey of 500 HR leaders, 63% of the respondents aren't happy with their current human capital management solution. 63%, Rick. So
Wow.
even though they've got these systems in place, and even though they're using these systems, they're not happy with it. At least 63% aren't happy. And plan to switch this year due to service and product issues. To help businesses leaders select the right HCM provider for their needs, Forrester stepped in. They published its 28 criterion evaluation, having identified the most significant HCM vendors. So if you look at the chart, you can see some fairly, what I want to say is usual suspects. Now you notice that these are dots, and then they have circles. That's actually these circles and the size of the circles, where they are located, are actually part of the statistical evaluation of Forrester. Those are not accidental sizing or anything like that. It's actually part of the overall evaluation process on not only where you're positioned in this chart, but also the size of the circles. So you can see that there's Oracle, Workday, UKG, SAP, Ceridian, ADP, and you've got iSolved as well as Darwinbox. So they're all there. And then it continues to move on down to the contenders. iSolved found itself in the strong performers, and the leaders, of course, are the three: Oracle, Workday, and UKG. Now, this was done by principal analyst Greg Prigden, and he had the assistance of James McQuivey, Sarah Marana, and Kara Hardick. The reason we can take a look at this is because it's hit the general domain of the press. Once the press release was done by iSolved, we were able to pull it from a publication, so it put us in a position to take a look at it. Now, author Craig Prigden writes in the Forrester report that HCM suite vendors continue to expand their capabilities in response to broadening the needs of HR technology buyers. So what this represents to me is with 63% not happy and looking around and continuing to shop for possible human capital management suites beyond what they have right now, it's a signal. It's a signal that things are changing. The customers are demanding more in terms of feature and function and capability. And it also means that we're probably going to see this chart again, and there's going to be some movement.
Interesting times. One thing I want to make sure I heard you right. Did you say 63%?
Yeah, 63% aren't happy. That was what was reported in the press release, which means it came from the research itself.
Now, if the leaders are those big companies that you mentioned up at the top, Oracle, and 63 aren't happy, does that suggest that a lot of people that aren't happy with the leaders now and might come down to those other challengers?
They might take a look at the challengers or the strong or the contenders or the strong performers as they are listed here. We don't have anything in the challengers category. It's just contenders, strong performers, and leaders this time. But you may also see some shifts and some movement. Oracle may go up or down or sideways, depending upon what they do between now and the next evaluation of human capital management suites by Forrester. And also, this was a great opportunity for all of these vendors to hear firsthand what the survey results were, so they could begin to address those issues directly with their customers. And also, it's an opportunity for them to gain market share. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, SAP may move up into the leader category. They're right there on the edge. And we also might see some additional movement by ADP and Ceridian and iSolved if they take in some of that feedback and begin to see how we can get those 63% a little bit more happy about what they've got, or possibly take those from other vendors, take those market shares. So it's an interesting time. So that was from Forrester, and this was about HR. So this whole discussion in this segment, this episode, is about HR. And I'd like to take this moment to work on something like a subject matter that is general, like HR, because it gives us an opportunity to apply the technology. Okay, it's great to talk about technology and trends and stuff, but it's also really good to apply it. So we move on to the discussion of HR with discussion about something that's on everybody's mind right now, which is, there's two things that seem to be on everybody's mind. Number one, what about remote workers, right? The remote workforce. We've heard plenty about that. Even Martha Stewart recently weighed in on that one. But also the other thing that we're hearing, and especially we're hearing in the technology world, is layoffs. So Gartner weighed in on layoffs, and an article was published in CFO Dive. So it wasn't published in HR, but it was published in CFO. And this was an interesting take for me because, Rick, whenever we talk about layoffs, we immediately think of HR, right? But the truth is, HR is the execution of layoffs. The truth is, layoffs are a financial decision. And so I think it was great that CFO Dive took a moment to step back and say, okay, let's talk about layoffs and the total cost. So the article was written by Elizabeth Flood, who's the publication's associate editor, and it was highlighting Gartner's research on the total cost of layoffs and how they may cause significant, and this is a term, organizational drag, quote unquote. We've heard a lot about some layoffs in the news, especially in your favorite sector, Rick, which is financial services.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's been going on, and it continues to go on, but it's a cross-industry trend. I mean, we also heard about layoffs with Microsoft and with Google recently, and also with Meta. But and while that may seem attractive or even necessary, layoffs do have their costs, and that was the point that was being made by the article and by the research that was done by Vaughn Archer, who's a senior director and researcher and advisory in the Gartner financial practice. Had this to say: the first thing to recognize is that there is an immediate upfront cost to layoffs, as a business will need to reorganize itself around a smaller group of employees and typically incur costly upfront severance payments. Businesses will likely see an increase in both costly contractor hiring and demands for increased compensation from remaining employees who are now under a greater burden. And this continues with, in more negative scenarios, the factors detailed here are also going to harm growth in existing and new businesses, new business, and ultimately a firm will start losing its customers. None of this is conducive for long-term shareholder gains. CFOs need to work cross-functionally with peers in HR, with recruitment, sales, and service to ensure that they are properly accounting for the potential costs of layoffs. In other words, take a closer look at this from a total cost of operation and total cost of engagement to do this kind of massive cultural change to your organization. The research also outlined ways in which companies look at alternatives for layoffs, allowing them to manage personnel in a cost-effective way without risking the quote-unquote organizational drag. So some workers may be open to voluntarily reducing their hours. This is according to the research, by the way. Reducing executive compensation, enacting a hiring freeze for internal redeployment. In other words, we're going to have a hiring freeze. Actually, I've seen some large companies do this recently and tell me about it. It's like, we're not hiring right now. What we're doing is we're doing internal redeploying. So it's like, we're going to find a way to get through this. Things are tight, things are tough, but we're not going to do any layoffs. So it actually really this is a customer I talked to. They were like, now I really feel good about my company because they're protecting us. It's like, no, we can't hire anybody, but we're not going to let anyone go. And
Wow.
we're not doing any layoffs. So it created in this particular individual that I spoke to a sense of commitment and a sense of allegiance that just deepened for him whenever he discussed his employment with the company that he's working.
Interesting outcome, because we haven't seen that in the American workforce in years, Thomas,
Right.
decades perhaps.
Right.
So now in
Right.
financial services, where I spend most of my time, they're always talking about the reasons we don't want to lay off. Reputational risk is high among those, especially for banks and other financial institutions. But you've given us some really good alternative reasons for trying to keep that workforce intact.
Well, and also I mentioned, and I'm gonna make a comment about this, and this is my own personal observation. There's a lot of discussion right now about AI and how AI is going to eliminate jobs. You need to move yourself away from certain jobs and so forth. So, there's all kinds of gurus online, especially, that are saying, hey, now's the time for you to get a new skill because your skill is going to be outdated because AI is going to take over. We've heard a lot about that. And then we also heard a lot about Microsoft's layoffs, and we also heard about Google's layoffs and Meta's, like I mentioned earlier. I think what you're really seeing in this case is you're seeing this isn't the end of the world kind of a layoff. This is a pivot. For those technology companies that I just mentioned, I really believe they're refocusing their business on the future. They're refocusing their business on what's to come. And therefore, we've already built Word, we've already built Excel, we've already built Outlook, right? It's already done. But now people want to get much, much, much more productive, and they want to start using AI in their daily chores and their daily tasks so they can get their work done easier and faster, and also possibly even better, quality work. So as a result of all this, folks are looking at this saying, hey, maybe we need to pivot our business a little bit more and focus a little bit more on what the new opportunities are. So I really believe that was the major piece of those three companies. IBM had already done the pivots earlier, so we actually didn't see a big layoff take place this year with IBM. They did have some redeployment that happened earlier this year, but they already made that move because they're already working on AI and they're already working on quantum computing. And recently, the CEO of IBM came out to say, what's going to happen is AI is going to create some jobs. It's not going to be a question of the fact that we're going to have this empty office space. It's going to be a question of we're going to be doing things differently here, and we're also going to be doing different things. And so as a result, we're looking at companies that are making this pivot and companies that are making this change.
I love it, Thomas. They say hard times make strong companies, and all of this change that you've been talking about over the past few episodes really speaks to that. But I do like the idea that companies, somebody in these big companies, is really thinking about what does the future look like with all of these things taken into account. Great show. Thank you for this information. Now, next time we're going to go back to supply chain, right? Because that's
We are.
critically important. Yeah.
Right. We're going to take a look now. Earlier this week, we took a look at strategic, right? The 8 trends and the 3 motivators that are guiding those 8 trends. Now we're going to take a look at some tactical looks at and perspectives on supply chain management that is being brought up by another set of analysts. And so we're going to take another look at it, but it's going to be from a different dimension, a different angle.
All right. I am looking forward to that. If you don't want to miss anything that we talk about on this show, you need to like and subscribe. So please do that. And also go to the website and sign up for the newsletter. You'll get all of this research and so much more. Right. All right, Thomas, we're going to talk about this again shortly. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all of you for being here. We'll see you next time on Walking the Virtual Dog.